Good day. It's time to do the switcheroo of trays. So I'm removing our black gravel trays that have no holes in them, and I'm replacing them with the green gravel trays that do have drainage holes in them, because we've had a lot of rain of late, and what you really don't want is roots to rot whilst standing in several inches or even an inch of water in a gravel tray, because it will do the plants obviously no good. Rotting is not good. So yeah, and I have to say these broad beans are looking pretty good and will definitely need to go in later this week. So I think I better get on with the tomato bed, or taking out the rest of the tomatoes where these are going to go in. Right, that's our tomatoes out of here, and as you can see there's quite a few weeds in there. There's also a few plants which I want to keep. There's this one which I can never remember the name of, but that's going down to Swanage. There's some pansies there. That's going to go into a pot, and I think we're going to plant that out at the weekend at a work social. There's something else. Where is it? There's a oregano as well, which is going to somebody else, so I need to take that out. So I'm just going to get on and weed this. That's this bed, or side of the bed, weeded, and I think all of our broad beans will happily go in here. There's a few things I just want to show you whilst I'm doing what I'm doing. Just to say, I need to get over to this side and weed there. You can mostly see there's a bit of greenery still there. I'll do that another day. I need to pull all of this sankfoil out to weaken it as much as possible, and from the edges here. This I'm going to be taking out. I didn't mention it before, but it's a dock. And you know what? We have very few docks on this allotment site. Quite a lot of stinging nettles, but very few docks. So what I've decided to do is take it out and put it in a bed near the polytunnel, and it can grow on quite happily there. And if anyone stings themselves, they can come to my plot and get some leaves from the dock to rub on the sting. I was noticing down here, I can see again, look, some sankfoil. Need to dig that out. And look, this was a sankfoil that was coming on in this, or coming over from this corner here into the bed. You can see the lovely, maybe you can see that, maybe if I put it down there, the lovely flower which has gone over, but it is lovely. But I often mention how with sankfoil it can grow every node. Unlike a strawberry, sankfoil can grow every node where it touches the ground, and I think this is a good example. Growth here, 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 and at the end. Though actually I think it began down here and grew this way. But yeah, that's what I mean when I say these can, wherever they touch the ground and there's a growth node, it can root. So yeah, this is going to be going into our hot bin composter once I get that going. And I think I'm going to enrich this bed more by putting further compost on top of it from one of our perennial weed compost bins. I've still got a barrow load, so yeah, take this dock out and then a barrow load of compost to go on top. I really can't remember, I can never remember what these are called, but whilst we have milder weather and they haven't been bitten by frost, I'm going to let them grow because they are rather lovely. I'll try and remember the name, but they will be bitten by frost, unlike the chard, or unlike, I hope, the chard. Because this compost I'd left in the wheelbarrow, some of it was quite wet. Normally I would give it a rake, but actually what I'm going to do is just let the water drain from it overnight, and then when I'm back tomorrow I will rake it flat, and I'll also take out that sankfoil which grows through the ridge between these two beds. I had intended to do the garlic today, I have to say, but when I came down and saw the broad beans and the water in the trays, I thought, you know what, do those trays as a job and get the bed ready for the broad beans. So that's exactly what I have done. So I'm very pleased about that. The garlic will most probably go in tomorrow or Thursday or Friday. I want to get it in as quickly as possible, but I also feel that because it didn't arrive in time for me to get it in a whole month early, if I miss another day or two or three at the moment, it won't matter. So yeah. Now also, I talked a lot about garlic in last week's upload of A Week at the Plot. It's Tuesday afternoon now, by the way. Yeah, welcome to A Week at the Plot. I've forgotten that bit. Have I even said good day? I don't know, maybe I have. Oh, I haven't even changed the calendar. We'll have to do that. Where was I? Yes, garlic. Now, quite a few people, well, 2 or 3 people mentioned in comments last week, why don't I keep my garlic from year to year, i.e. harvest some and keep some of it, or harvest all of it obviously, and keep some of it to plant the following year. The reason I don't do that is a very, very valid reason. I did sort of mention the issue that we have on this plot in the video last week, and that is that we have white rot. White rot on alliums is not good at all. So what I don't want to do is harvest bulbs and then say, right, those look good, I'm going to put those aside, but then me not know that there is white rot on those bulbs or spores of white rot, and then somehow keep it so that when I plant it out a few months later, which it would be, because if I'm harvesting, you know, the end of May, June, July, August, September, it would be like 4 months ideally that I would be planting it from harvesting it. I feel that there could be a propensity for white rot to spread over the site. So Yeah, I buy new each year simply because I don't want to spread white rot. Now there are many people who say, well, actually you can't do that. You know, you're as long as your bulbs look good, there won't be any white rot on them. But I'd just rather be cautious. I'd rather get a harvest. I'd rather buy fresh, good garlic, plant it and harvest it, than plant my own harvest and find that white rot is proliferating. So that's the reason. It's as simple as that. There are many people that do say, well, white rot doesn't work that way. Just like there are many people who say you can't compost tomato leaves and tomato stalks which have blight. I tend to do that, and I don't see any increase in blight when I use that compost, because blight spores have to be in living vegetative matter, which decently composted compost isn't. It's a living matter, but it's not a living it's not a living leaf or a living stalk. It's changed its structure by the time we're using it. So blight, apparently, and that's what I follow, doesn't do that. With white rot, I'm not so sure. So I edge on the side of caution and buy new each year. Anyway, waffling. I am going to go. It is getting dark. It's most probably about 22:05 at the moment. One of our fellow plotters did ask me if I'd go and get him and myself a pint at the Fox, and I did go to the Fox, but unfortunately they've had their beer festival over the last weekend or the weekend before, I'm not quite sure when, and they've still got all of the stuff left over from that, which basically means that many people who are regulars at the Fox and like their usual things, a Pride or Proper Job or whatever, don't buy. They go to a different pub at this time because they want their usual tipple. They don't want something different. Some people do, but in fact when I walked in I thought, gosh, this is really empty for a Tuesday afternoon, and yeah, sure enough, there aren't that many people there, particularly the regulars. Anyway, I'm going to go. I will see you again later in the week for further segments of A Week at the Plot, and one of those, I'm sure, we're going to be planting garlic over there. Oh, and I've got the lid here open because I forgot to change the gravel tray in there, so I left the lid open to remind me that I need to do that now. I'm going to get on and do it. Bye. Good day. Getting my garlic in. So, breaking up the cloves from the bulb. This is Eden Rose. These in the centre will always be, well, usually be a little bit smaller. So those are a tad smaller. Do this one as well. This skin is often referred to as paper. I think I referred to it last week as paper as well. Gosh. Come on. Quite a lot of cloves here. Some really small ones there. Quite a few, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22 sort of relatively big ones. That's Eden Rose. I've got Messidrome, Claydor and Germador to do as well, and I put their name on a brown bag so that I don't mix them up. But that's a chunky one. This basal plate here, that's where the roots will come out, that's where the shoot will come out, the top. So you're planting it that way down, root side down, basal plate down, and this should be just below the surface, just touching below the surface, the top of the actual clove. So yeah, I'm going to split the rest of them up and then get on and plant them by making a little hole and then just pushing them down. But do make sure when you make the hole there isn't a stone at the bottom of that hole. You want the roots to really be able to get down and not be hindered by a stone. So yeah, I'm going to get on and do the others now. Let's put these into the bag. As I often do with my plantings, I've laid them out. They're sort of zigzagged, which give them a little bit more space between each other. I've got 2 rows of Eden Rose, 2 rows of Messidrome, 2 rows of Germador, and then on the end here I've got 1 of Claydor. So now I'm going to get onto my kneeling pad, which is just down here, out of shot, or maybe it's in shot, and start putting these in. A few little weeds there, making sure there's no stone at the bottom, which there was. So the growing tip is just a bit below the surface. Gosh, another stone. It's a little one. Sometimes I do this with my fingers. I just dib a hole and put them down like that. At the edge of this bed, it's a little bit harder. The ground is a little bit harder. Yeah, in the center. In fact, there it's fine. Right, I'm going to get on. Oh, big stone. Look at that. Big stone. Have I grown garlic in here before? I'm not sure. See, that's much, not sure if you can see me doing it here. That's much softer to get in. Anyway, I'm going to get on and do these. Lots of stones. I'll tell you why in a moment. Delighted to have the garlic in a month later than I had wanted to get in, though the order that I admit it did say dispatched by the end of October, so I just thought it would arrive earlier because I ordered so early. But yeah, there we are. Anyway, it's Thursday afternoon now. It must be about 4:30, 4:45, something like that. I've been chatting to my plot neighbour for about 15 minutes. I was going to do this tie-up bit, and then we were both standing on our plots looking at the sunset, which was behind you, and it was just so glorious. Both of us, well, we sort of stood there independently and watched it for about 4 or 5 minutes. and then we both moved and saw each other, so I went over there and had a chat. So yeah, and have been able to help her with a few things that she wants to get rid of on her site, but might be on her plot rather, but they might be of use for the site. So yeah. And yeah, I mentioned about stones. We have a lot of stones on this whole site because we're surrounded by a river. You know, 2 sides of our site is a river. So this used to be a sort of a riverbed where stones and things would wash up. So basically there's an awful lot of stones on our plots. And in fact, a few plots over, one person who had his plot for a couple of decades, he took out all of his stones and he made his paths into stone paths, like really big gravel. You know, I mean, you saw some chunky bits there. Most of the bits are like that, and his path, his plot is traversed. He's no longer there, but is traversed with stone paths. Quite a good idea, really. Quite a good idea. Anyway, yeah, happy to have my garlic in. So we will see how that does. And I did decide to tamp it down, rake it relatively level. I pulled one out whilst I was doing that, so I put it back in and raked it sort of level with the back of my rake, I think. Anyway, and then I tamped it down a bit because I'm hoping that by doing that it will deter Brush, our resident fox, who loves digging up recently disturbed ground. So I'm hoping by tamping it down a little bit, A, it firms them in a little bit, but B, it stops Brush going and grubbing them up, which happens year in, year out. It will be interesting to see how those do, because I remembered that bed for some reason is always a little bit moister than other beds. This side of the plot is generally drier than that side of the plot. Sorry, this side of the plot is generally drier than that side of the plot. And that bed, for some reason, is relatively moist. Anyway, I've planted them now. I'm not going to dig them up and change my mind, or change my mind and dig them up, do it that way round. Anyway, fingers crossed. See you very soon. Bye. Good day. In fact, good early morning. The remnants of a good time the night before. So we had our Bonfire Social last night, an opportunity for people to burn spent and decrepit wood. So many of us, I mean, I've had some, put it aside on our plots, point on our plots, and then we all get together, well, all of us, many get together and have the Bonfire Social as part of Guy Fawkes. No fireworks, just a bonfire. And I'm going into the sun now. Let's go this way. You can see this is all pretty clear, which is great. We've got a bin there, I think for rubbish. I think there's a rubbish bag from our work social yesterday. Somebody or some people have already taken things away, i.e. in terms of recycling, and most of the wood that we had yesterday has now gone. There's just a little bit I can see of brush over there. When I say brush, I mean dry twigs and things that could go on now. I'll most probably do that, but delighted to come down and find that everything is really tidy. Chairs put back. I've sort of got a feeling that one of our plotters is down here and has put chairs away, because I'm noticing there's some wood. You see that bit of wood there? which if that had been there overnight I think would have burnt. So I think someone's been down to do tidying already this morning, which is great, because it means that part of the job is done, and I know that there are other people coming down to do other things like clearing out our barbecues. So that's great. I'm just going to do a bit of tidying in the communal shed. It's all pretty tidy in there, which is great. And then I'm going to get on with getting our beans, our broad beans in. Before that, here's some of the flames from last night. As per usual, I've taken plants out of the modules and put them into a tray, so I find it easier to transplant them this way rather than taking them out of the modules at the time that I'm actually planting. And these will get positioned out. As you can see, pretty good root systems on them, not surprisingly. Yeah, decent plants. Bit bigger than I would want really, but I'm going to give them some protection. I'm going to plant them now. Well, I'm going to position them out on the bed, then plant them a little bit deeper, maybe about an inch deeper than they are in the modules, and then I'll let them buffet about in the wind for a while, and then I will net them from strong winds and frost, so or particularly ice actually, in the deeper winter of usually around January, because these stems are still quite fragile, and they can get frostbitten basically when it's really icy. That's 3 rows of 20. Actually, I think there's 58 in here in total. 2 didn't germinate. And as you can see, they're sort of, if I come here, maybe you can see, they're sort of zigzagged to give them a little bit more room. I mean, when you're sowing raw beans, I would sow them much closer than this, but I'm just giving them, I've got the space here, and I'm giving them a little bit more space than normal. And yeah, I'm hoping that these are all at a stage now where the seed is no longer of interest to mice. However, my plot neighbour did sow hers directly. Let's have a quick look at those. So these were all sown directly a good few weeks later than I sowed mine in the modules, and so far they look undisturbed by mice. Let's just hope that that continues, because we know that earlier in the year when somebody sowed some about 2 weeks before me, they were munched, which is why I sowed mine in modules. Anyway, we will see. That's all of these now in. So garlic in and broad bean plants in this week. Pleased about that. Done a bit of damage to some of the leaves of the cardoon in the process, but I'm not too worried. Well, I'm not worried about that at all. Yeah, just happy to get these in, and hopefully over the coming week we won't have breezes that are too strong or winds that are too strong, and these can just buffet a little bit in the wind, strengthen up a bit. Hopefully it won't get down to a heavy frost, which I really don't want at the moment. I mean, it may do, it may not. I haven't looked at the forecast, but yeah, fingers crossed for these broad beans. And as I've said, we will be netting them. I'm not sure whether we'll net them right across the bed or we'll just net the broad beans. I've sort of got a feeling we'll just net the broad beans. Yay for jobs done. I've felt so far with the garlic and with the broad beans, it's all been a bit of a rigmarole so far, because as I say, I wanted to get the garlic in a month earlier, and ideally I'd sort of be sowing our broad beans end of October, beginning of November, directly in the ground. That of course saves on compost, so you don't have to fill your module trays and do that. And I think it gives them a better start as well. But with the last few years that we've had, where mice have just taken out our broad beans, I didn't want to do that. So I hadn't expected it to be so mild. It's still relatively mild. We got down to 7 degrees last night, but the days over the last sort of month and over the next week or so at least are still quite mild. So of course the broad beans that I did sow in the modules, which I've just planted out, have grown really well. They've been acclimatizing outside on the bench for absolutely weeks, have grown to a really decent size. Most are at least 8 inches, if not more. But ideally I would want them a little shorter than that, because I want them to be able to be buffeted by the wind. So that's what I'm hoping for over the coming weeks. As I have said, I'm hoping for breezes rather than wind, so that those stems can strengthen and the roots can really get down below. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm hoping for. And where the previous year, where quite a lot was taken out by mice, i.e. not last year but the previous year, we had quite a lot taken out by cold wind chill, and that tends to, you know, if the stem breaks or some frost gets in, it blackens the stem and they can regrow, but I found that they didn't regrow quite as well 2 years ago. So yeah, just fingers crossed on these basically. Right, that's it for this week's A Week at the Plot. It's Sunday morning, it's pretty early still. I don't think there's anyone down here. As I say, I think there may have been somebody down here earlier, but not at the moment. Certainly have heard no noises or anything. I was hoping to strim, but in reality at the moment the grass is just far too wet. And in fact the ground, when I was doing what I was doing, the ground is really it's very moist, put it that way. It's not wet, but it's very moist, and my gloves and my trowel the handle ended up with an awful lot of soil on them, so I've had to give them a little wash and give my trowel a wash as well. And of course I washed it in a bowl so that that soil could go onto a bed, because you don't want to wash it in a what do you call them, a water butt, because that remains in the water butt and will end up around the water butt at some point when the water butt is cleaned out. Yeah, I'd much rather have my soil on my beds rather than somewhere else. Anyway, that's it for this week's A Week at the Plot. I hope whatever is going on in your garden, your growing space or your allotment, whether you are in the middle of things in the southern hemisphere or quietening down as really we are in the northern hemisphere, I hope you are getting pleasure from it. Any comments, any suggestions, any thoughts, just put them down below. That would be absolutely great. And if you watch us on Planet Vegetaria, our Facebook group, there will be segments as we go through next week, and if you watch on YouTube, there'll be another full upload in a week's time. What we will be doing, I do not know. I think there might be some strimming. I mean, it seems odd that there needs to be strimming, but there does need to be strimming, so that might be something. Anyway, we'll find out next week, won't we? See you very soon, and happy growing. Bye.